Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's been a little while, but I've had a couple multi-day out-of-town photo shoots that have taken up most of my time here recently. For those who may be new here, I'm a commercial photographer with a YouTube channel and not the other way around. So sometimes work will prevent me, unfortunately, from consistently creating these videos. But the flip side is you get to see the real thing. And these past couple shoots were some real doozies to have back to back. The first was a multi-day night shoot, meaning we would start around 5 to 6 p.m., I think, and work until around 3 a.m. And then the next shoot, I moved a couple states away where we had several sunrise sessions, take a break around midday, and then shoot until sunset. You know, that was pretty rough back to back. But that means more content coming for y'all in the future when I'm allowed to share them. Okay, with all that out of the way, I thought today we would check out a recent photo shoot I had with the South Carolina men's basketball team. We'll take a look at the behind the scenes lighting setup, a couple resulting images, including talking about a in-camera technique that I used during the shoot. Then I'll walk you through how I retouched a few images to match what was going on with the video portion of the shoot and how I prep it for an Instagram post. Okay, I think that covers everything. I hope that sounds like a pretty good video, but I guess we'll find out after we roll that intro. All right, let's set the scene for this photo shoot with the men's basketball team here at South Carolina. Their creative team's concept was to shoot this at a welding shop. So in my mind, that meant they would be renting out the space and people wouldn't be working around us during the shoot. But that wasn't the case, and it definitely made the location authentic, to say the least. And I'll just say, if for some reason you have a dream to conduct a photo shoot at a welding shop, be prepared for a lot of noise, dirt and dust, and some pretty noxious fumes coming from the equipment. Add in the fact that we were supposed to be wearing masks, and I believe my voice was gone by the third player I was working with. Anyway, let's talk about the lighting. Since we were gonna be in a gritty location, I wanted to complement that with some gritty lighting, so let's walk through the setup. All right, so let's walk it in on this setup that you can see is in a nice and dirty welding shop. So right here on the back side, you can see I've got my fill light, which is the umbrella. Let me pause right here. You can see I've got the front boom with the beauty dish in the front. Up top, I've got a medium umbrella. Off to the left-hand side, I've just got a strobe with a reflector working that left side of the player, the camera left of the player. And that's basically my only edge. So it's kind of a rim slash edge all in one. On the right-hand side, I've got the 6-foot strip box that you can see right there with the grid on the strip box. So that gives me kind of a different, more evenly, a little softer edge on the right-hand side of the player. And here you can see the workers at the welding shop that I did a picture of as I was getting set up, because they were all pretty curious about what was going on. So that was a lot of fun too. And here's a resulting clean image from that setup. Now I'm not gonna photo dump a bunch of the results here since the team hasn't even started their season yet, and it's not my place to show everything in this video, but you should get the idea here. Now, I will show what I was doing on some of the images, and that is pulling the zoom on my lens, or actively zooming during a few of the frames. I was already dragging the shutter a little bit to allow for more of the ambient light to show the background, you know, since we were taking the time to do this shoot or conduct this shoot in a welding shop, and I wanted to show that. So while I was shooting at a 60th or 50th of a second or so, it would give me enough time to pull off this little technique where you start the zoom lens while you press the shutter. The faster you zoom and the slower the shutter, the more pronounced the effect will be. So it takes a little practice, but it can give you a pretty neat effect in some cases. In some of my files, I think it was a bit too much, but in others it worked pretty well. And it just kind of gives a bit of a motion blur effect. And with digital cameras, it's really easy to practice because you can see everything. And it can possibly be another tool you can keep in your box to pull out when the situation is right. And also remember, you can zoom in or out based off of the situation. In this case, I was zooming in. So let's talk about the different aspects for this shoot. While I was in a spot capturing the still images, the video team was in another building capturing the content that they would need for the intro video and various social videos to use throughout the season. On their set were a couple of guys in lifts working grinders to create sparks for the background and actual foreground of the video. Sounds pretty cool, huh? That's what I thought, and in a perfect world, if we had more time with these players, I think it would have been cool to have probably alternated with the video team, capturing content with the sparks and all that fun stuff. They did have some folks shooting some stills on their set, and they came out really nice. And I did join them in that location to capture the team's poster image, but that was all the spark time I had, unfortunately. But having a look at the video and the still results, it gave me a visual reference to how I was going to retouch and composite a couple of these images. So let's jump on the computer and I'll run you through the layers. All right, so this is the image that I use for my latest Instagram post as of recording this video. And on this image, I did use the zoom effect, in-camera effect. I thought it worked really well on this one. So, and it kind of just gives it that extra energy or feeling of energy that I think complements the pose with the yell and everything here. So I pulled this one and we will go through these layers. So what I wanted to do first of all is isolate my player. And let me say too, on the front end here, I'm gonna try to run through this quickly because whenever I do these Photoshop breakdowns, I kind of get sidetracked and they turn out to be longer than I want them to. So to keep it brief, I'm gonna run through fairly quickly so it doesn't drag on too long. All right, so first of all, what I wanted to do is isolate my player from this backdrop so I could lay some effects in behind him and also adjust the backdrop without affecting him. So you can see up here on this layer 2 is where I did that. To quickly do that these days in Photoshop, it's really, really easy for the most part, but you can just go under Select and then choose Subject. And even with this zoom effect, you see how nicely the selection is. There's a little gap right here, but it's so small that it's not really gonna be noticeable, I don't think, in this case. So that is how I did that. Deselect that. And so what I did is then I placed him up on this layer by himself. So now what I do is go back and retouch everything behind the player. So to start off with, I'm gonna darken this backdrop, which is gonna allow everything else to kind of pop forward. And you saw the poster image earlier with those sparks up in the corner. So what I did is I grabbed one of those files, isolated, just kind of went in and quick selected some of those sparks. I think I just used the lasso tool. Drop those in here, change the blend mode to lighten, so then it just shows the sparks. There was a window up there, but when I do my crop for Instagram, which is what this image was for, that you're not gonna be able to see that within that crop. So I've got the sparks. Now on these sparks, what I did to have them fit in with this image or complement everything else that was going on, I did a radial zoom on these. And so you can find that under filter, blur, here it is under blur, and then it's under the radial blur. And you'll see there's one where you can do like a spin and then a zoom. So I did the zoom, and this filter does not give you a preview, so you have to kind of play around with it based on your image. I can't remember exactly what I used, but it's probably not too far off of what's here, which is 10. It might have been like 15 or so. You might have to reapply that effect a couple times to get what you're looking for. But that is what I used on this backdrop here. And when you've got sparks like that, they're gonna put off a glow. And so what I did is kind of just add, well, I sampled color off of these sparks just by using this sample tool here. And then I painted in an area set behind our player, set the blend mode to soft light. This is what it looks like if it's normal. But I set it to soft light with the opacity at 45%. So it kind of gives that soft glow. Then what I did is added another layer that was set to overlay, which will give a bit more punch, a little more contrast using that same color behind it. Let's see here. And so you can see right here, it's just a tighter area of that color, but it kind of just gives that extra little, I'm saying punch a lot here, but it gives it that extra little punch or pop kind of behind the player. And overlay is going to be more powerful or more contrasty. It's usually about twice the contrast of what you find on a soft light layer. And then I did leave that at 100% just because I think I basically used the opacity with the brush to control that effect. All right, so coming back on top of our player and working with the glow from the sparks, let me zoom in a little here. You can see what I did on this layer, which is set to color. I'm using that same kind of orangey, yellowish color coming from the sparks. And I'm painting a glow on our player. You can see that kind of right here on the skin. Any of these areas that I feel like would have been affected by the light coming off of those sparks. And so then I added another layer. This first layer was on color, and then this one is overlay once again, giving that kind of color contrast. It seems to kind of stick onto whatever you're painting. And then what you need to do, what I did here, is just adjust the opacity to increase or decrease that effect. So you can see here, if I take it down, it's barely visible. I didn't like it at 100%. And so what you can do here is kind of a checks and balances for how much you brush on when you're using your brush. So I use kind of a low opacity brush and build this effect up as I go. Another cool trick to use for this, once you have a selection here, you can do a command, probably control on PC, I guess, click, which will put a mask, or it kind of puts a barrier around what you click here. So then when you're painting on this layer, it will only paint inside that line, so you don't have to be so careful about painting outside the edges or off your player. If you didn't have that, then you would have to use your brush in here and make sure you stayed kind of right on the shoulder elements here and just on the player. But with this line, it helps feather the brush too, so you can be out here brushing and it will only show up within that line. So a neat little trick to make things easier for you there. Okay, so we're still building the color here on all these layers. This next layer is just an overall kind of color adjustment. I'm going to zoom back out. And so you can see what I've done here is this is on a overlay blend mode at 20%, just a color fill layer. This just kind of puts a blanket of that orangey yellowish glow over the whole image. Helps blend all these elements together that we've been building up in the background. This next layer here is a dodge and burn on a 50% gray layer. You can see right here I also used that same technique with the boundary there. So you can see how hard that line is. And that just means I had the brush out here outside of. So set that to normal so you can see. So the white areas I'm painting in highlights, the dark areas I am painting shadows. But you can see exactly where the selection line is on my player. And so we'll set that to soft light. The gray disappears. We get our highlights and accentuated shadows. Just really where you can kind of go in and dial in or more precisely focus your lighting effects from the actual photo shoot. My next layer here is a color balance layer where I did some color correcting just for this interpretive. It's kind of a color grade for this image. And what I did is added some cyan and blues into the shadows. And then in the highlights, I brought up the yellows a little bit. So this kind of is where you might take the time to interpret your image a little bit more. I basically was kind of taking out some of the magentas in the overall image there, kind of giving it more of a filmic type feel. Let's see here on this next layer. So when I saw the videos and stills from the video portion of the shoot, the sparks in the front would make these nice bokeh elements. And so I wanted to recreate those, and it just so happens that on my photo shoot from a couple weeks ago that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the night shoot, we were in a kind of a bar nightclub for one of the settings or locations. And there were some Christmas lights or just small little lights around an area where I could isolate them on a kind of a dark background. And I manually focused so they would be out of focus, and I kind of got these nice little bokeh balls. You can see right there. So, and that's just kind of a note too, whenever, at least for myself, when I'm in an area or a location and I see something that I might be able to use somewhere else, and it's only going to take a couple of, maybe a minute or two to capture that, I will do that, and then I'll pull those files out of that project and place them into a corresponding folder, so like a bokeh folder in this instance, or like if I'm on location, there's a great view of the horizon, I can collect clouds and save those for future projects as well. So in this case, I captured the bokeh. The multicolor bokeh does not make sense here. So what I did is clipped a hue saturation layer on top. You can see my settings up here. And I had it to colorize, that's important. Adjusted the hue and the saturation to get them to match what we had going on here in the background, so it looks like some sparks are in front of our player. Next step, what I did was a couple of combine all layers, and then brought in, what I did is applied a high pass. This first one is where I like to kind of add that extra contrast for these sports style images. And so my magic number is around 59 for the contrast part of a high pass run or filter. And this is set to soft light. Once again, soft light and overlay kind of play in here. If you want to take it over the top, you can use overlay and adjust your opacity. I like to go with the soft light. It's not quite as strong. It's about half the strength, as I was mentioning earlier, on these effects. And I've set the opacity at 40% here. With this technique, you really have to watch halos and stuff like that. And I find if you bring it less than 50%, you're usually pretty good in that area, usually free of most of those halos and stuff like that. But this is what it would look like if we were at 100%. And in my mind, it's just a little too strong. So 40% for me was kind of the sweet spot here with this image. This next one is another high pass, and this one is set at 2, and this is mainly to just apply a little bit of sharpening, which is really not necessarily necessary when you're using a camera like the R5 with the RF glass. It is usually sharp enough to where I don't even have to apply sharpening, but I just did on this image for just kind of the basis of what I've got going on here. It just kind of adds just a little bit more crunch to this type of image. Okay, and so moving from here, I just did a select all layer because this is how I normally do my Instagram post. And so what I'll do is create a new document. And for Instagram, I like to upload, I've got a whole video on this, but I like to upload at twice the resolution, which is 2160 by 2700 at 72 pixels. So I create that document. What I do is then grab this layer here, drag it, drop it onto there, and then from here, I will just adjust the crop for how I'm feeling. The image works in a vertical format for Instagram. So we will maybe bring it a little bit closer in there. So, you know, something along those lines. So that's kind of from start to finish, how I put this image together to kind of match, as I was mentioning, the video part of the shoot. So that's it from bringing it into Photoshop and creating a Instagram image. So I think that about does it for this one. Please hit that thumbs up if you feel this video is worthy, and that actually really helps this channel. For more content just like this, hit that subscribe, I'm doing the thumb again, but hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to it so YouTube will actually let you know when I'm back on here. In the meantime, you can find me on social media at QuantzPhoto, on Instagram and Twitter. Please be safe and healthy out there, and I hope to see you all back in here. I'm struggling through this one, and the next one.